Hey guys, so I'm trying something new this time. If you look at all of the other video essay videos on my channel so far, you can see they're fairly focused 10 or so minute review or analyses of different series, and for the most part in these videos, I talk about those series and then I stop. And that's the whole video. But for this one, I wanted to try something different. So I read a bunch of different series, so many that I could never hope to make a video on every single one of them. There are a lot of stories that have some really good aspects to them, or have something noteworthy to say about them, but I just don't have enough to say to make an entire video about. So that's what this video will be, and hopefully I do these videos semi-regularly, like maybe once every month or two, so I can get some of these noteworthy but unappreciated series some attention. And just as an organizational thing, I'll be keeping the series that I enjoyed more to the end of the video, but all of the series I talk about have at least something of value in being examined. Anyways, without any more waiting around, let's get into it. Mage Again. Everyone has seen the trope of, the main character died, so now he has to come back to life in the future. It's common. Hell, I talk about 2 series with that same trope in this very video. But this one is a bit different. So the story I'm talking about in this one isn't anything noteworthy. It has some unique notes here and there, but they aren't what I value here. The main thing to admire this series for is the world building. If any of you have seen movies by Studio Ghibli, I'm talking stuff like Spirited Away or My Neighbor Totoro, it feels very similar. Ghibli has always had a very distinct and peculiar type of world to set its stories in. The feeling of whimsy you get from looking at Ghibli movies is unparalleled, but I think this story somehow comes close to that. The creature and character designs feel very fantastical and remind me a lot of those monsters in some of those aforementioned Ghibli films, and the art style only adds to that feeling. The panels have almost a painterly feel to them, as if they've been spread on the canvas with a brush and not a pen, and the pacing mirrors this too. The story takes things slow, only revealing things when they need to be, keeping you in the dark about so much of the world and its inner workings, making you wonder and imagine about how things work. For as much praise as I would like to give the world building in the story, I can't say my time with it was perfect. As I got to the later chapters, there was a huge shift in the setting for the story, from the world of magic and wonder to just like our world, Earth, with all of its modern and boring conveniences. The story still retained my attention, but the captivating landscape that kept me around almost abandoned the story entirely, only being able to be found on occasion, and that's why this series is the first that I wanted to talk about. While it does do some things very well, I can't say it's perfect, but it still deserved to be talked about. LV999 Villager. This series, like the last one, is also a very trope-laden story, or at least that's how things seem to be. At the start of the story, we get the same old introduction that we get to 99% of the other fantasy stories nowadays. Oh no, there's a demon lord trying to destroy the world, and only our main character, who is oh so quirky and strong, can save us from this coming apocalypse. It was rough, honestly. Like, it almost made me quit after the first few pages because of how generic it was. Don't ask me why I kept reading, I was very bored. But after a few chapters, the story actually starts to pick up a bit. The main character, who is the titular LV999 Villager, is indeed very overpowered, but it doesn't seem like he can do anything. He still has some drawbacks and issues that make him feel less overpowered than he actually is, which I appreciate. And on top of that, the story isn't as generic as you may at first think. The mechanics of the world, which in other stories of this type would go unexplained and simply exist as set dressing, are actually acknowledged and questioned. To give you an example of this, in a lot of these fantasy stories, beating monsters and enemies would reward the main character with experience, money, or items if you're lucky. And this is of course based on the same mechanic existing in video games and other such media, but it rarely feels natural in these fantasy manga. But in the story of LV999 Villager, this isn't the case. The main character in the story calls out and questions these mechanics. He constantly wonders why the world is the way it is, and tries his best to break open the game-like world he finds himself in. And that isn't the only distinct element in this series, but to go into depth with that, there'll be some spoilers, so watch out if you care. So, much later into the story, after the primary conflict is resolved, the main character and his crew leave the world they are in and move on to the next stage, which they are told will help explain the situation and reasons for the rules in their previous world. But to put it lightly, that is a massive understatement. When they leave their home, they're transported to Earth, the real Earth. The planet as we know it has been completely transformed into a dystopian post-apocalyptic wasteland, with humanity being forced into underground shelters to survive the unknown horrors of the surface world. It turns out that the strange game-like mechanics that appear to be nonsensical and unnatural were in fact fabrications made by scientists on the actual world of Earth. Everything in the main character's old world, which is called Earth Clear, was made as a simulation to train possible heroes to fight to protect humans on the real Earth. It's a shocking and interesting reveal, and was not the direction I expected the story to take, which made me really interested in the story from that point on. Sadly, the first 30 or so chapters are just the same old meaningless fluff as usual, and only serve as a lead-up to the huge twist, which is cool, but it doesn't make those chapters any easier to get through. If that twist made you interested though, I would suggest skimming through the first bit and getting to know those characters, so that the second half of the story would be easier to get to, because the writing and character work is actually pretty good. Okay, with those 2 series out of the way, we can get on to the really good stuff. A returner's magic should be special. I've gone back and forth on whether I should make a video about this series, cause it's really freaking good, but I can't pinpoint one key aspect of it to focus the entire video around. So I guess we'll just have to see. So this story, like our first one, is also a reincarnation plot, but this story, unlike the last one, executes on that premise really well. Like, the initial premise is very cliche. It's just the standard, oh, I died, but then I didn't, and now I'm in the past. Holy shit. But while Mage Again did some things exceptionally but still dropped the ball in some major regards, I can't point out a single flaw with this story. The time travel hook pays off in some big ways, because now that the main character, Desir, knows what's going to happen in the future, there's a constantly ticking time bomb looming over the main story. Desir knows that the disaster is soon to strike, and he has to be ready for it. But while Desir knows the future, that doesn't make his life any easier. His actions in his new life drastically changed the course of the timeline he thought he knew, leading to huge consequences down the road for everyone. For an example of this, early in the story, Desir and his team stopped the robbery of an important gem that Desir knew was going to happen from the future. And although they are successful, this starts a long string of events that leads the organization that planned to steal the crystal into being a much more bigger threat to the world that they once were, eventually leading to a massive war that would have never happened without Desir's meddling. And again, even though Desir has his memories from the future, he isn't all-knowing or all-powerful. While he is very strong, his power comes from the immense knowledge that his past self had, allowing him to analyze and take control of the inferior magic of those around him, even though his talent for magic isn't good enough for him to produce those high-tier spells for himself. In the story, Desir has to grow and mature not just as a character, but as a person. He has lasting trauma from the past he grew up in. The horrific deaths that surrounded him in his past constantly sit on his mind, causing him to question his decisions and try to take the burden on himself, and himself alone. The initial hook of Desir having returned to the past isn't just a cheap way to keep the audience around. It leads to some of the most intense and meaningful parts of the story as a whole. And even stepping away from just the main character, the rest of the story is just as good and well developed. The organization that I talked about before that tried to steal the crystal, called the Outsiders, bring an element of classism into the mix. The Outsiders as an organization seek to bring down the oppressive nobles and replace the government with a commoner-ruled system. They use violence and anarchy to try to achieve their goal of stopping the oppression of the poor, which contrasts greatly with Desir's ideology. He is a commoner as well, but instead of seeking to burn down the current establishment, he is trying to change the structure of the world from the inside out, by proving that a commoner can be just as talented and loyal as any noble. I don't know, this may just be me, but the ideologies here seem kind of similar to Lelouch and Suzaku's ideologies from Code Geass, if anyone has seen that show. It's not similar enough to make me think it's copied in any way, but I just felt like mentioning that. Anyway, back to the classism. While this story is told from the perspective of a commoner, it's not like either side is without flaw. In the past, a commoner revolution occurred, resulting in the death of many nobles, which humanizes the nobles which seek to oppress the poor, leading neither side to look truly evil. As I said, no element of the story seems out of place or poorly done, so I can't really mention everything that I want to, but I'll just try to hit some few last ones before we move on. The characters are really well done. They all seem like real people who really react to each situation according to their morals and beliefs. No individual feels like they're acting out purely because the story demands it. Everyone is smart and everyone has their own wants and desires which motivate them, which makes the story feel lived in and memorable. The main thread besides the Outsiders are these things called shadow worlds, and I don't think I can properly explain them here, but just generally, they're like gateways to the past, which require some people to venture inside to solve problems in. The shadow world creates a duplicate setting of some moment in history, and there's some set objectives in that world that need to be completed. Anyways, mechanics aside, their inclusion is straight up genius. The adventures of the characters into these shadow worlds is not only intense and exciting, it also reveals a lot about the situation in the real world, because the scene portrayed in the shadow world is an exact replica of the past, including any details that would have been otherwise forgotten by time. This allows the main characters to get information on the problems in the present by looking at the past, and it feeds us exposition in such a subtle and engaging way. Finally, the art, which is freaking insane. Like, I genuinely look at some of these panels for minutes on end, just following the action and taking in the colors. It's so breathtaking that it distracts me from the actual story and dialogue on occasion. But I'm not complaining. Anyway, yeah, this section was pretty long, but I think it was worth putting my thoughts on the series in a video, because I didn't really know how to make a full standalone video about it. And by the way, these next two segments may be slightly shorter, because I definitely want to make a video on both of them in the future. A lot of stories can be considered good, but what separates a good story from a great one is the impact it leaves on the reader. Even if a story makes a million mistakes, that's not a problem, as long as it leaves you with something. As long as that something isn't disgust or repulsion, that is. But this story, What If AI Ruled the World, left me with so many things I can't even put it into words. I felt sadness, wonder, confusion, joy, pity, and so much more. Even though it has its problems, this series is a master at what it does, and I can't wait to talk about it more in the future. But for now, I'll try to sell you on it in as little time as possible. When I first picked the series up, I expected it to be a weird and wacky dystopian action story, something I could read to waste the time away on a Saturday night. But little did I know about the trip I was about to go on. What If AI Ruled the World is a collection of short stories, of small little vignettes, all set in the same world and universe, each expanding on it more than the last. They're all set in the future, in a time where artificial intelligence is a reality, but still, each of these small stories are designed to make you feel something completely different. Some end in triumph, some end in sadness, others leave you shocked, but all of them give you something to take away, and all of them expand the world they are part of so much more. The overarching plot only starts kicking in around the third to last section, but you realize that through the seemingly unrelated side stories up until that point, you were in exactly the right mindset the author wanted you to be in. Each of these side stories, on top of giving you a complete, unique experience in and of themselves, have all been giving you the information and background knowledge you need to understand the intensity of the ending. A seemingly unrelated plot point here becomes a stepping stone for the whole conflict. A concept that is explained in one point is turned around and expanded upon in the ending, and the very first chapter foreshadows the entirety of the climax so well that it left me dazed after I first read it. I really don't want to get into spoilers here, but trust me when I say you won't regret checking out this series. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. Just wait for my full-length video in this series. I'm sure it'll convince you. And if you want to be notified when that video possibly comes out in the future, please consider subscribing. Alright, anyway, on to the last series. The Boxer. This is a sports series. This is how they all should be. I'll go out and say it, even though I haven't seen any of the other popular sports manga or anime, this is the one to beat. Exciting action-packed sports scenes that can be easily digested by anyone, regardless of familiarity with the sport? Check. Deep character-based conflict that goes deeper than the match they revolve around? Check again. Clearly understandable thematic struggles that form the centerpiece of the story? You guessed it, check a third time. The story has it all. The art, the story, the drama, it has no faults. It draws you in with gorgeous illustrations, keeps you there with some light boxing action, and then delivers a literal gut punch of emotion to get you invested in the characters. So before I rant more, The Boxer is a story about a boxer. Wow, I know there's some really accurate titles out there, but this one definitely takes the cake. But even though the title is simple, the story is anything but that. The main thematic conflict through the first half of the story is the idea of talent and what that leads to. So our main character is named Yu, and to call him naturally talented would be an understatement. He has such a deep-seated talent for boxing that it was impossible for him to not get some attention, despite his fairly normal life. One day, a legendary boxing coach named Kei was touring some new prospects, trying to find a talent to make into a boxing legend. While he is visiting one of the potential candidates, he finds Yu being beat up in a dark alley, and Kei, without intervening, watches the violence. And while he bears witness to this, he notices something peculiar. It seems that the punches thrown at Yu are being traced by Yu's eyes. Kei finally goes down and intervenes and confronts Yu about not trying to dodge the punches being thrown at him, to which Yu replies, it was too bothersome. Trying to confirm his suspicions, Kei throws a full-on sucker punch at the back of Yu's head, fully committed to testing Yu no matter the consequences. And somehow, Yu reacts in time to dodge the former professional's full-on punch. At this moment, Kei knows that he has found the one. A talent so monstrous it could dodge a pro-level punch, and a soul so empty that it doesn't even seek anything beyond its immediate survival. Kei has found his perfect talent. After Yu is taken in by Kei and is forced to climb up the ranks of professional boxers, seeking to obtain all the title belts from every single weight class, the main conflict stems from Yu's constant battles with older, more experienced boxers. And the draw of the story is to see how far Yu's God-given talent can take him. The struggles of talent versus hard work is embodied nihilistically in the story, which is not a usually taken angle in these types of stories. To add to that, the art for the story is amazing as well. The boxing is portrayed very cleanly and in a way that even I, somebody who's never boxed, could understand the way the sport worked. But those aren't the best moments in the story. Even past all of the excitement found in the ring, the best moments are the surreal, psychedelic drawings that accompany the thematic conflicts of the main story. They're beautifully detailed and eye-catching, and make the abstract concept of existence and meaning so much more digestible for the layman. I would go on, but I think I've talked enough in one video. This script is getting bonkers long, and I do want to get this video out on Tuesday like usual, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this brief marathon review, and if you enjoyed, please like the video or comment any feedback. This is something completely different than the usual stuff, so hopefully it was still entertaining for you guys. Thanks for watching, and bye!